The Vrex Dominion had conquered 100 worlds before Tarsus IV. They had shattered empires, crushed rebellions, and left the ruins of civilizations smoldering in their wake. Their armada, massive, sleek warships lined with plasma cannons, hung over the planet like a swarm of hungry predators. On the surface, Dominion loudspeakers blared their ultimatum in every known language. Kneel, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be erased. They expected fear. They expected surrender. What they got instead was silence. General Elias Kane stood atop the fortress walls of Bastion Prime, the Warborn headquarters, and the planet's last line of defense. He looked skyward as the Dominion fleet loomed over the horizon. His face, weathered by war and time, was expressionless. The Warborn did not fear death. They had faced it too many times to be intimidated by it. "Transmission open," Kane asked, turning to his comm officer. "Yes, sir. They're listening." Kane stepped forward, his voice calm but edged with iron. "You stand at the gates of humanity's fury. You believe this world is yours for the taking. You are wrong. We are the Warborn. We do not break. We do not surrender. You will not take this planet. You will only add to our legend." He gave a slight nod, and the transmission cut. A moment later, the sky erupted. The Dominion began their bombardment, sending waves of plasma down from orbit, searing the Earth, and turning vast stretches of the planet's surface to glass. Cities crumbled, entire forests burned, and oceans boiled. But Bastion Prime stood. It was more than steel and concrete. It was built into the very bones of the planet, carved deep into the mountains, a fortress designed to withstand extinction itself. The Warborn did not waste resources on panic or retreat. They had trained for this moment since birth. As the first wave of Dominion dropships descended, their hulls glowing red-hot from the atmosphere, Kane turned to his second-in-command, Captain Rowe. "They think we'll fight like a planetary defense force," Kane said. Rowe, a towering soldier with cybernetic arms and the eyes of a predator, grinned. "They think we'll fight like lesser men." Kane gave the order. "Show them the truth." The Warborn moved like a single entity. Artillery batteries roared, launching high-impact munitions that tore through the first wave of landing craft before they could touch the ground. Anti-aircraft turrets spat death into the sky. But the real terror came when the Warborn themselves engaged. As the Dominion forces poured from their surviving dropships, hulking reptilian warriors clad in battle armor, something they had never encountered happened. The humans charged, not cowering, not falling back, not seeking cover. The Warborn stormed the battlefield, faster than any Dominion soldier had anticipated. Their strikes were precise, their movements honed to lethal perfection. Every blow was backed by generations of experience, every maneuver the product of countless lifetimes of war. Within minutes, the landing zone became a graveyard. From his command ship, Lord Siren watched in growing disbelief. Humanity was supposed to be weak, disorganized. Yet here they stood, a force unlike any the Dominion had ever faced. He clenched his jaw and issued a single order: "Send everything." The real battle had begun. The battlefield burned. Wreckage from downed Dominion dropships littered the landscape, their twisted metal husks spewing black smoke into the crimson sky. The ground was slick with alien blood, pooling in craters left by the Warborn's artillery strikes. But despite their early losses, the Dominion pressed forward. Lord Siren had sent everything. Thousands of armored reptilian warriors stormed the ruins outside Bastion Prime, their war cries echoing through the shattered remains of what was once a thriving human colony. Heavily armed Dominion walkers, towering machines of war bristling with plasma cannons, marched alongside them, unleashing a storm of firepower at the fortress walls. Yet the Warborn did not waver. From the cover of rubble and ruined buildings, the first counterattack began. Captain Rowe led the charge, moving like a phantom through the smoke. His enhanced reflexes made him faster than the Dominion's targeting systems could track. 1 second, he was a shadow. The next, he was a blur of movement, carving through the enemy ranks with a plasma-forged combat blade. A Dominion warrior swung its massive war axe at him. Too slow. Ro ducked, drove his fist into the creature's armored chest, and with a sickening crunch, sent it flying backward. Before it even hit the ground, Ro had already turned to the next target. All around him, the Warborn fought with the same terrifying precision. A Warborn sniper perched atop a ruined skyscraper picked off Dominion officers one by one, each shot clean, efficient, fatal. Squads of soldiers moved in perfect coordination, flanking enemy positions without a single wasted motion. They fought as if they had seen this battle before, as if they already knew every Dominion tactic and every possible outcome. Because they did. Every Warborn carried the memories of those who had come before them. The experience of past battles, the wisdom of fallen warriors, it all lived on, imprinted in their minds. They were not just soldiers. They were an unbroken chain of war. In orbit, Lord Saran watched the battle unfold from the bridge of his warship, his claws digging into the armrest of his command throne. This was not how it was supposed to go. Human armies always broke under overwhelming force. Every species the Dominion had conquered, whether through brute strength or fear, had eventually crumbled. But these Warborn, they did not retreat. They did not hesitate. And they were winning. A Vrake's officer hesitated before speaking. "My lord, our forces are being cut down at a staggering rate. Their movements are too precise." Jiren's yellow eyes narrowed. "They are human. They bleed just like the rest. Overwhelm them." More Dominion dropships screamed through the atmosphere, deploying fresh waves of troops and mechanized war beasts bred for planetary devastation. The ground shook as the Dominion unleashed their true power, deploying war mechs 3 stories tall, bristling with energy cannons, into the fray. For the first time, the Warborn found themselves being pushed back. Inside Bastion Prime, General Kane stood before the massive holotable, analyzing enemy movements in real time. He watched as the Warborn lines began to stretch thinner, forced into defensive positions. Even their strength had limits. Ro's voice crackled over the comms. "They're bringing in heavy artillery. We need a counterattack before we get boxed in." Kane's gaze remained locked on the battlefield map, his expression unreadable. Then, with quiet finality, he gave the order. "Send in the Titans." Across Bastion Prime, massive hangar doors rumbled open. Shadows moved within. The Dominion had brought their war machines. The Warborn had brought something worse. The hangar doors of Bastion Prime groaned as they slid open, revealing the Titans. Towering figures stepped forward, their armor black as obsidian, their eyes glowing with the cold fire of centuries of battle. These were not machines like the Dominion's towering war mechs. These were Warborn, warriors who had survived so many battles, absorbed so much combat experience, that their very bodies had been reforged into living weapons. Their limbs had been enhanced, their muscles reinforced with combat-grade cybernetics, and their minds. Their minds carried the knowledge of every fallen Warborn before them. They were humanity's answer to extinction. The Titans moved with terrifying precision, their massive forms a blur of controlled violence. One of them, an ancient warrior known only as Orin, surged forward, his fists tearing through the armor plating of a Dominion war mech as though it were paper. He ripped out its power core with a single motion, letting the metal husk collapse around him as he turned to face the next. Another Titan, clad in reinforced power armor twice the size of any normal soldier, took on a dozen Dominion warriors at once. Their plasma weapons seared into his armor, but he did not falter. He crushed one beneath his boot, lifted another with a single hand, and used the alien's own weapon to obliterate the rest. From the bridge of his warship, Lord Siren's hands clenched into fists. "What are these things?" he hissed. A Dominion officer, struggling to maintain composure, swallowed hard before responding. We believe they are an advanced form of Warborn, my lord. Their bodies have been modified beyond human limits." Jiren's gaze darkened. "And their minds?" The officer hesitated. There are rumors, my lord. The Warborn do not die the way others do. They. A deep voice interrupted. It came from behind Siren, where a Dominion scientist stood, his scales pale with fear. They transfer themselves. Kiran turned, his eyes narrowing. Explain. The scientist exhaled sharply before continuing. Every Warborn carries the memories of those who came before. When they fall, their consciousness is uploaded and implanted into new recruits. They do not just train soldiers. They are their past soldiers. They fight with the experience of generations. Shiren's claws tapped against the armrest of his throne. You're telling me they don't die? The scientist lowered his gaze. Not in the way we understand. Shiren's mind reeled. He had underestimated these creatures. He had believed them to be just another species, biological, limited, mortal. But now, watching as these titans carved through his finest warriors with perfected combat efficiency, he realized the horrifying truth. The Warborn were not just soldiers. They were an unbroken army. Back on the battlefield, General Kane observed the carnage from Bastion Prime's command center. His expression remained cold, calculating. He had known the Dominion would learn the truth eventually, and he had known it would terrify them. Row, Kane said into his communicator. Go ahead. Kane's eyes never left the holomap. Now we strike at their heart. Far above them, the Dominion fleet loomed, unaware that the Warborn were not just defending anymore. They were preparing to end this war. The battlefield was a graveyard of Dominion war machines. Smoke and fire choked the sky, and the once proud banners of the Vrex Dominion lay torn and trampled in the mud. The Titans had torn through the enemy's war mechs with terrifying efficiency, their movements a brutal symphony of destruction. Yet even as the Warborn stood victorious on the ground, General Kane knew the battle was far from over. Above them, the Dominion fleet remained intact. Thousands of warships still orbited Tarsus IV, their cannons primed for another devastating orbital bombardment. Lord Siren would not accept defeat. He would rather reduce the entire planet to ash than let his empire suffer humiliation. Kane stood at the center of Bastion Prime's war room, his hands resting on the holo-table as he studied the incoming transmission from the Dominion command ship. A figure flickered to life before him. Admiral Vorex, one of Siren's top commanders. His reptilian face was tense, his yellow eyes betraying uncertainty. Kane leaned forward. If you're here to demand surrender, don't waste my time. Vorex exhaled through his nostrils, a slow, measured breath. No, I am here to negotiate. The Warborn officers around Kane stiffened. Captain Rowe, still streaked with the blood of Dominion warriors, narrowed his eyes. This is a trick. Kane raised a hand, silencing him. He studied Vorex carefully. The Dominion admiral was no fool. He had seen what the Warborn could do, had witnessed firsthand the horror of an enemy that refused to die. You've realized it, haven't you? Kane said. Your soldiers are breaking. Vorex's expression darkened. They are shaken. They're terrified, Kane corrected. They've seen an army that fights like it has lived for centuries because it has. Every Warborn is a living archive of warfare. Your men are facing enemies who remember every battle, every strategy, every weakness. And now they understand. Kane's voice dropped lower, his words slow and deliberate. You can't win. Vorex's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Behind him, Lord Siren's voice bellowed over the channel. Do not listen to these vermin, Vorex. We will crush them, as we have crushed 100 worlds before. Kane smirked. Go ahead, throw everything you have at us. All it will do is ensure that when we come for you, we'll already know how to kill every last one of you. For a long moment, Vorex said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached for his communicator. This is Admiral Vorex to all Dominion forces under my command. His voice was steady, but the weight of his decision hung in the air. We are withdrawing. Shiren's rage was instant. You dare. But Vorex cut the transmission. Silence filled the war room as Kane and his officers watched in real time. A third of the Dominion fleet, those under Vorex's command, began pulling away from orbit, disengaging their weapons. It wasn't a full retreat, but it was the first fracture in the Dominion's iron grip. Kane exhaled, barely a whisper. Now the real war begins. The Dominion fleet fractured like a wounded beast. Admiral Vorex's warships veered away from the battle, slipping out of Tarsus Ivy's orbit. The Warborn on the ground watched as nearly a third of their enemy's forces abandoned the fight. But Lord Siren did not retreat. Inside his flagship, the indomitable Wrath, Siren seethed. His claws dug deep into the arms of his command throne, his scaled lips curling into a snarl. "Vorex is a traitor," he growled. "Execute his family. Burn his homeworld." The bridge officers stiffened but obeyed. Xirin's golden eyes blazed as he turned to his remaining officers. "I will not let these creatures defy us." He rose to his full height, his voice thundering across the warship's command deck. "We have crushed empires. We have ended civilizations. I will not have our legacy tainted by a species that refuses to stay dead." He slammed a fist against the holo table, activating a new battle plan. "If our warriors fear the Warborn, then we will break them another way." A new fleet of Dominion ships, smaller and sleeker, emerged from the shadows of the main armada. These were infiltration craft, stealth vessels designed for one thing: assassination. Their target, Bastion Prime. On the surface, within the Warborn stronghold, Captain Rose stood beside General Kane as they watched Vorex's fleet withdraw. The mood in the war room was tense, victory balanced on the edge of a blade. "This isn't over," Ro muttered. "Siren's still out there." Kane nodded, his expression unreadable. "He won't accept a stalemate. He'll try to hit us where it hurts." As if in answer, alarms blared through Bastion Prime. The command center's lights flickered as security systems engage. "Breach detected," a synthetic voice announced. "Multiple unknown contacts inside the facility." Ro's weapon was in his hands before the words finished. "They're inside." Kane turned sharply to the nearest console, bringing up the security feed. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dominion Night Reapers. These weren't standard soldiers. These were the Dominion's elite assassins, creatures bred in darkness, trained in silent kills, enhanced with cloaking technology and lethal precision. They didn't conquer planets. They eliminated threats before they became wars. And now they were inside Bastion Prime. "Lock down the central core," Kane ordered, his voice calm but firm. "They'll be coming for command." Ro activated his comms. "All Warborn, report. We have Night Reapers inside the fortress." This is a full red alert. Across Bastion Prime, Warborn soldiers mobilized, sweeping corridors and sealing blast doors. But the assassins were already deep inside, moving like shadows, bypassing security, slitting throats in the dark. One by one, Warborn sentries went silent. Then the power grid failed. For the first time in centuries, Bastion Prime was plunged into darkness. Kane clenched his jaw. The Warborn had faced armies. They had faced monsters. But now, for the first time in this war, they faced an enemy that didn't come with banners and war cries. This was no battle. This was a hunt. And they were the prey. Darkness consumed Bastion Prime. Emergency lights flickered along the corridors, casting eerie red glows across the metallic walls. The fortress, built to withstand planetary sieges, now faced an entirely different kind of threat, one that did not march in legions or fire from orbit. The Night Reapers had come. They were death made flesh, silent, unseen, perfect killers. General Kane and Captain Ro moved swiftly through the command center, weapons drawn. The Warborn were the pinnacle of human warfare, but the Night Reapers were something else entirely. Enhanced with active camouflage, bioengineered reflexes, and cloaked weapons, they were designed to kill before their targets even knew they were being hunted. And now they had infiltrated the Warborn's very heart. Ro barely saw the first attack coming. A flicker in the air, a shift in the shadows, then movement. He ducked just in time as a Reaper's plasma dagger slashed past his throat. In one fluid motion, he turned and fired, but the assassin was already gone, vanishing into the blackness. "Damn it," Ro muttered. "They're fast." "Keep moving," Kane ordered, his voice low but steady. He tapped his earpiece. "Report." Static. Then, a ragged voice came through. "Command. Multiple hostiles. They're inside the barracks. Warborn down." The transmission cut out. Kane exhaled sharply. He had expected an orbital assault, a ground invasion. War. But this was a surgical strike meant to cripple them from within. Shuren wanted to gut the Warborn leadership, to end the battle before it became a war he couldn't win. But the Dominion had made one fatal mistake. They assumed the Warborn could be hunted. Kane activated his personal combat visor, switching to thermal vision. The moment he did, the shadows came alive. 5 Reapers surrounded them, their forms bending light, barely visible to the naked eye. Kane didn't hesitate. He fired first. His rail pistol spat tungsten slugs at hypersonic speeds, tearing through one Reaper's torso before the assassin even knew he had been detected. Ro followed his lead, pivoting and snapping off a burst of plasma fire. Another Reaper fell, its cloaking field flickering as it collapsed, revealing the twisted reptilian form beneath. The remaining assassins lunged. One nearly reached Kane, until a massive armored hand clamped around its throat. Titan Orin had arrived. The colossal Warborn warrior lifted the Reaper into the air with a single hand, its cloaking field shattering under the strain. The assassin thrashed, stabbing wildly, but Orin didn't flinch. He simply squeezed. The Reaper's windpipe collapsed with a sickening crack. The last 2 assassins tried to retreat, but it was too late. The Warborn had adapted. Within minutes, the fortress corridors became a slaughterhouse. Warborn soldiers, using heat vision implants and predictive combat algorithms, turned the hunters into prey. The Night Reapers had come for a silent massacre. Instead, they were learning why the Warborn never fell. As the last assassin's body hit the floor, Kane turned to Ro. "Kaxiran just played his last hand," Kane said coldly. Ro wiped blood from his blade. "Then let's show him what happens when he loses." Kane nodded. The Warborn had defended long enough. Now, it was time to go on the offensive. The last Night Reaper lay motionless on the cold steel floor of Bastion Prime. The Dominion's assassins, their deadliest killers, had been eradicated in less than an hour. They had entered the Warborn's stronghold expecting prey. Instead, they had found executioners. General Kane holstered his weapon and turned to Captain Ro. "Get me a direct line to Xiren's flagship." Ro smirked, wiping blood from his combat blade. "I'll make sure he's listening." Within moments, the Warborn had hijacked the Dominion's communication channels. Across the battlefield, every Dominion warship, every ground unit, every officer still loyal to Xiren heard the voice of the man they had failed to kill. Kane's tone was calm, but beneath it was something cold, something final. "Lord Xiren, you came to break us. You came to erase us. But you have learned. Humanity does not die so easily." There was silence, save for the hum of the comms. Then, Chiren's voice, low and seething. "You think this is over?" Kane gave a small, knowing smile. "Oh, it is." A new alarm blared through Bastion Prime. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was an activation sequence. Across the mountain range surrounding the fortress, massive underground silos rumbled open, their ancient doors peeling away to reveal the Warborn's final weapon. Orbital dropships. Dozens of them, each one carrying squads of Warborn, seasoned veterans equipped for planetary boarding actions. For centuries, Bastion Prime had been the final line of defense. Now it was the spear. The Warborn weren't just fighting back. They were taking the war to the Dominion. "Launch all dropships," Kane commanded. "Target Xiren's flagship." The sky erupted as the first wave of Warborn vessels shot upward, engines roaring against gravity's pull. They streaked through the atmosphere, their hulls plated in heat-resistant armor as they ascended toward the Dominion fleet. On the bridge of the indomitable Wrath, Lord Siren watched in stunned disbelief. Hundreds of Warborn soldiers were inbound, riding drop pods like guided missiles, aimed directly at his fleet. Incoming boarders, a panicked officer cried, "Destroy them!" Siren roared. The Dominion fleet opened fire, plasma cannons scorching the sky, but the Warborn dropships weaved through the chaos with surgical precision. Some were struck, exploding into fireballs. But not enough. Not nearly enough. The first drop pods impacted. They didn't land in hangars. They tore through the hulls of Dominion warships, embedding themselves deep inside before their hatches burst open. The Warborn poured out. Inside the indomitable Wrath, alarms screamed as red warning lights bathed the corridors in blood-colored hues. Dominion soldiers scrambled to respond, but it was already too late. The Warborn moved through the ship like reapers, their weapons cutting down everything in their path. Siren grabbed his personal plasma rifle and activated his combat armor. He would not run. He would not surrender. If this was the end, he would face them himself. As the Warborn breached the final door to his command chamber, Siren raised his weapon. He bared his fangs in defiance. "Come and die, then." The doors to the Dominion command chamber burst apart in a fiery explosion. Smoke curled through the air as armored figures stormed inside, their movements precise, relentless, unstoppable. The Warborn had arrived. Lord Siren stood at the center of the room, his massive reptilian form clad in ornate battle armor, his plasma rifle raised. His golden eyes flicked across the incoming warriors, searching for fear, hesitation, anything he could exploit. He found nothing. They moved like executioners, like fate itself given form. Every step they took was the weight of 100 lifetimes pressing down on him. But Siren was no coward. With a roar that shook the chamber, he unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, his shots precise, deadly. The first Warborn through the door took a hit to the shoulder, but he did not fall. He kept coming. Another shot seared toward Captain Rowe. He sidestepped effortlessly, closing the distance in an instant. His blade flashed. Siren barely blocked in time, his gauntlet absorbing the strike as he lashed out with his own claws. The two clashed in a brutal melee, each strike sending sparks flying. Siren was strong, stronger than any human, but Rowe was faster. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to anticipate every movement, to shift just before impact, to counter before Siren could adjust. But Siren was not fighting to win. He was fighting to survive. And he was losing. As he stumbled back, his armor cracked, his breath ragged, he turned to the holotable in the center of the room. A single command would overload the ship's reactor, taking everyone with it. He reached for it. Bang! A rail pistol fired. The shot took Siren in the leg, shattering bone. He collapsed to one knee, snarling in agony. General Kane stepped forward, his weapon still raised. "You lost." Siren gritted his fangs. "You think this matters? The Dominion. The Dominion is already dying." Kane gestured to the holomap. Across the system, Vorex's defected fleet had turned on their former allies, firing upon those still loyal to Siren. Dominion warships were burning. Some fled. Some surrendered. Others fought, but the tide had turned. Siren's empire was crumbling before his eyes. Still, he bared his fangs, refusing to beg. "Kill me, then. Do it." But Kane only holstered his weapon. "No." Siren blinked. "What?" "We don't need to kill you," Kane said simply. "You'll die knowing we won. And your people will remember the day you fell, not in battle, not as a conqueror, but as a failure." The weight of those words hit harder than any bullet. As Warborn soldiers secured the command chamber, The indomitable Wrath shuddered. Its weapons went silent. The Dominion fleet, leaderless, scattered. Tarsus Ivy had not just survived. It had triumphed. The Warborn had never fallen. And now, neither would humanity.